Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm Magical Maker, Katie Rempe.
And I'm the maker of magic, James Devine.
Join us as we stitch together the symbiotic relationship between crafting
and the craft. Hello, Katie.
Hey there, Jim.
I'm excited for this episode.
Me too.
We're going to talk about making ritual making. See how we did that? We're going to talk about ritual making ritual. See how that? Okay.
Ooh, yes, it works both ways.
Not everyone gets my things sometimes. They're up there. They're out there. It takes a lot of brilliance.
The smart people get it.
The smart people got it. Yeah. And in the second half, we're going to talk about witches' covens and knitting circles. And this was kind of your idea, which I thought was brilliant. How when you're knitting, it's often knitting in a circle. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, witches meet in circles.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The knitting circle.
The witches circle.
Yep. The witches
crafting circle. Yeah. Yes. And crafting circle. Oh, I see what you did the same thing.
Yes. See?
Crafting. Oh my gosh. See how we are?
We're terrible together.
We're ridiculous. We're kind of the same person.
A little bit. That's
Our brains are merging. Okay. Well, so let's talk about ritual making.
Yes. All right. So what does the term ritual mean in magic?
Oh yeah. Ritual. So, well, let's just talk about that word ritual, right? I mean, we use it all the time. What's your morning ritual, right? So we talk like whenever we're like, I got to change are we doing this now coming out of COVID? What's your morning ritual? I got to lose that 20 pounds I gained eating all that sourdough bread that I made all during COVID, right?
That's right.
So what's my morning ritual? What's the ritual of something? So we use it kind of in a mundane way, but when we're talking about magic, suddenly ritual. Oh, and I guess we also talk about it in religion. I guess it suddenly occurs to me, right? Like I'm going to religion. I'm going to go to my service on Sunday. It's my religious ritual, right?
Yep.
But when we're talking about it in magic, it suddenly has this sort of like ritual.
Yeah. Ooh, it's got a mystery around it.
Yeah. So ritual in magical terms, I think, is basically it is kind of a routine. It is kind of what is the tradition or what is the way in which we structure the method in which and I will say for me and for our tradition, the way in which we structure our access to liminal space and to the experience of the numinous. And what I mean by that is how we experience access to the divine, or access to an experience of something greater than ourselves, or access to an experience beyond our regular mundane sort of life.
And so would you say that's the biggest difference between like ritual and routine then? Sort of that.
Yeah, I do. I think routine is sort of like, I do this thing every day. I sort of do it almost without thinking, right? And I think that the connection is I get up in the morning, I drink a glass of water, I use the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I hop in the shower, and then I get dressed and I drive to work. Like I have done those things and sort of like woken up when I'm pouring coffee at work. I don't even remember my morning. Like, how did I get here? Have you ever had that experience where you've sort of like woken up at work in a way and you're like, I'm dressed, my clothes match, I kind of have a cute outfit on, but I don't really remember driving to work and I don't really remember.
Yeah. Who did this?
Or just your drive to work. Have you ever driven to work and then gotten to work and like, I am glad I didn't get in a car wreck because I do not remember driving to work.
Oh, yeah. Or like on long trips too. Same thing. All of a sudden an hour's gone by and you're like, oh, I'm not even talking to anyone. Where was I?
Yeah. So in that way, I think there's a little bit of the ritual takes us out of time and space takes us out of mundanity, and that might be a little bit of a connection. But I think in
Yeah.
magical intentional ritual, we are trying to access that step beyond the veil, that step into liminal space, so that we can access a magical realm and a place outside of our mundanity, creating
Okay.
intentional space where we can do magic.
Yeah. All right. So then that's the difference between you, like you said, getting up, doing your thing, going to work, and then sort of waking up there versus someone who has the ritual every morning of getting up and having like a 5 minute meditation thing, or they read for 5 minutes or whatever. And they're more awake and in the process of the moment. From those things that are their ritual, because otherwise the routine would just be the sort of cruise control aspect.
Right. Right.
Okay, so then that's
So how,
exactly the idea of kind of bringing it into magic or making then.
yeah. So how would you bring that into making?
I mean, so there are, again, it's kind of the difference between wanting to just follow a pattern and maybe wanting to customize it, having more of your own personal influence in that aspect could make it more ritual. So figuring out maybe like, oh, I want certain colors to put in there, or even just the time you put into it. So saying like, okay, I'm going to make this project. I have an intent that I want to get it done fast. I'm going to work on it every Wednesday for, 4 hours, or for an hour a day for, as long as it takes. So having that time put aside where like, okay, this is when I do this time, I turn everything else off, that becomes sort of like the concentration time. And again, that seems to be like the ritual thing. It's like the concentrating the energy into the thing, and really recognizing that. So, like, if you wanted to get sort of numerology with it, you could say like, oh, I'm going to start a certain project at 4:44 every day, and I'm going to knit for 44 minutes because, I'm trying to put strength into my project by the power of four. And maybe it's a square, it's got four sides. So you're just sort of like expanding the idea out more and more, the more you think about it, even though it could be quite simple. But the more you spend time into making it bigger, the bigger impact it could have.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I like that. Or, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
could use any number, right? And
Sure.
do that with time or with stitches or anything like that. That's a
Mm-hmm.
cool idea.
Mm-hmm. It's also a great way just to keep up on your skills or grow new skills. It doesn't have to necessarily be about creating a certain thing or getting a project done. Your ritual could be learning new things. Maybe you take a like Wednesday, which is a day of good communication, and you use that for, taking an hour a day to learn a new skill, learning a new stitch pattern, or learning different ways where you could intersect your magical practices into your making practices.
Oh, how cool would it be to knit like an orange, like cowl that is dedicated to Mercury and it's about communication, and you're knitting it on a Wednesday?
There you go.
That would be way cool to do a
Yeah.
mercurial communication piece. And it's the color of Mercury, and it's on a mercurial day, and it's in the hour of Mercury. So each day there's an hour for each of the planets, right? So there's
Mm.
Mercury hour, and you
Yep.
could do that. So use those planetary hours in that way. Wow. That's such a cool idea.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Or
Awesome.
even like we've talked about before, the idea of using like the 7 day candle or something like that. Just anything that will get you to do something fast, especially incorporating that element of fire. If you had something that you wanted in 7 days, maybe because again the numerology, or you need something done quick, and this is just the motivational factor to have you get it done in a way
Right.
that's not stressful. It's you're in control of it. We all
Yeah.
have deadlines, but it's how we respond to them that can help the energy flow. So,
Totally.
yeah.
Well, I think about ritual being also, um, we talked last episode about spells. And in some ways, there's some overlap between spells and ritual, right? And
Mm.
I think about ritual being the things that we repeat, whereas spells are sort of the things we do. Sometimes we do a spell within the context of a ritual. Like a ritual is the little bubble that is that is around a spell that we do
Mm.
inside. Not always. You don't always need a ritual to surround, a spell, but
Sure.
sometimes we do a ritual in order to sort of surround a spell, or we do a spell and then we do a ritual when we enact the spell, right?
Mm.
So a ritual in magically is often for us. I'll just give you an example of what a ritual looks like in our tradition or in many other sort of Wiccan or Wiccanite traditions.
Mm.
Is you would create a magic circle, create a sacred circle using the power of imagination in your mind, using often a tool like a sword or a knife. You'd cast or cut a magical circle outside in a area, or inside in a living room or in a magical temple room, and you would use words to incant a magical circle. And then within that circle, you would call on the elements of earth and air and fire and water. You would call in the Lord and Lady, or the goddess and the god. Perhaps you'd call the ancestors or the fairies, or whatever other powers are special to your tradition. And in doing so, perhaps you would guard or ward the circle with salt. Perhaps you would also use a form of a chalice and a blade to put those together in a certain way to create a warding and a protective element to your circle, right? Perhaps there would be a broom that would also help cast a circle of protection around the space. So people do it in many, many different ways, and they would create this sacred space within which then you can do your magic and your spell, right?
Mm.
And so this is a way of casting a ritualistic circle, a ritualistic space within which to do your magic. And then there's a ritual to take it down, right? And
Yeah.
to release the bubble, to pop the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
I can do it. Let's see.
Ooh,
That
that's
was,
a good one.
wait,
Oh,
there we
that
go.
was good too.
To pop the bubble so that the intent and the work that you're doing inside this magic sphere is then released out into the ether and into the world to then bring our magic into physical reality so that it's worked. So then the idea is, let me have a place where I can really concentrate, where I have like minds together, where we're all in alignment, we're all in agreement. I don't know if you've ever tried to do something like, if you've ever tried to read when someone is listening to talk radio or watching the TV. There's talk radio going on over there, there's TV in the living room, you're in the kitchen, you're trying to read, and there's like competing like let's just use a really ridiculous example. There's Fox News on the radio, there's there's Fox News in the living room, there's NPR on the radio, and you're trying to read a book.
Yes.
I'm like,
information overload.
There's two different opposite opinions going on. There's
Yes.
arguing on both sides, and you're trying to read just something fun. I mean, that would be ridiculous, right?
Yes.
It's really nice to have a little bubble where you can be like, I want a little cone of silence where I can just be. And if I'm going to be with people, I want them to all be on earbuds. Or I want to be in a library. Or if they're going to be listening, let's all be listening to something the same or that's harmonious so that we can work together towards something in shared harmony, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is something that is also helpful to talk about. That kind of hints to what we're going to talk about after the break.
Yeah.
But I think right now, when we're talking about ritual, like that's what we're really sort of doing, right? And so when I think about ritual, I think about this, and this relates with some of the things we've talked about in other episodes, right? Why you need a magical space, why you need a magical, a crafting space also, right?
Yep.
So
Yes, exactly.
when I think about entering your craft space, what do you do to set up for how you do a project? There's a little bit of a ritual there. So do you have any rituals? What's the ritual you do? Think about what do you do when you're like, I'm getting antsy to knit?
A lot of the time the yarn will do the talking for me. So it's very like sculptor-esque. Like I can see what it could become just by looking at the
Oh,
material, sort of a
so
thing.
you're doing a little yarnomancy?
Yeah, there you go. I'm defining the project through the hanks of yarn. I didn't even realize that. Yes.
That's
Huh.
pretty cool. You really are doing some fibromancy, yarnomancy.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Well, and then you have to go and find the right needle to give you the gauge that you're going to want to need. So you might have to play around with that a little bit. It's sort of a ritual of beginning a new design. You know, you have to go through the swatching process. Oh, maybe this needle's too big. Maybe that one's too small. It's about finding that magical middle ground, you know?
So then you're knitting a little square and maybe
Mm.
several of them to see like which one kind of feels right. So
Yep.
that's really cool. That's part of your ritual,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay, keep going. This is amazing. You really do have a ritual.
I do. Yeah. And
Okay,
then
keep going,
from
keep going. Then what
From
happens?
there, once you kind of know what the knitted fabric is going to look like, then the design starts to come from that. So then I'll start to sketch out things, different designs. I'll maybe do it on a person or just do it flat, some watercolor, whatever. And then, yeah,
Oh,
about,
so you're actually, oh, sorry to interrupt. So you're
yeah,
actually drawing or like doing a little art piece or doing a little drawing, even
yep,
with some watercolor, and
yep,
you're sort of like imagining how it might lay, how it
mm,
might sort of wrap around, and
yep.
sort of having some different, and maybe you do a few of those. Like I
Oh,
want it to
yes.
go here, I want it to be this long, I want it to go here,
Hmm.
like a real fashion designer.
Yeah, it's almost like I've had practice with this before.
It's almost like
Yeah.
you have your degree in fashion design or something.
Imagine that. Yeah, I'm pretty used to making like cohesive lines of things, and actually it has been very helpful. I must say, one of the more helpful things I learned in school because one idea, maybe it doesn't work out for the thing I'm trying to do at that time, but maybe later it could jump off to being something else. So it's never a
Right.
wasted opportunity, all these little ritualistic things. So,
Wow. Okay. So then you kind of settle on, I think I know what I'm
mm,
doing.
yep.
I'm
Then I at least
making
have a
this,
basic vision.
I think I'm knitting this ball gown. I
Yes,
think I'm
exactly.
on it. I'm just
Yeah, how
kidding.
did you know?
This 3-year project.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Yep. And then from there, you cast on, and sometimes it works out perfectly the first time as you knit it and write down as you go. And sometimes you start and you realize, oh, no, that doesn't work. And you have to take it out and start it again. So, but
Yeah.
you learn and you redo, and it's always better after you do that. So,
That's pretty cool. So that's the ritual you have when you're actually designing a project from scratch. There's some iteration and some
mm,
experimentation that's there. When you're doing something from a pattern that already exists, or you're doing something again, like
yes.
you knit several of those cozies for
Mm-hmm.
people, right, over the summer, and you're doing something from a pattern that already is there. Is that ritual similar? Like you don't have to draw that out again. What's the ritual for something that's already like in the bag? You already know how to do it.
I always review the pattern, especially if it's not mine, because I
Okay.
have a bad habit of assuming the directions.
Like raise your hand if you're that person. I'm that totally assuming directions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I
So
know how
that's a
I would
great,
make it, but that is not necessarily how other designers are making it, and I have been burned on that many times.
like, are you saying it matters? It might matter.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you want it to come out a certain way, it might
Yeah.
matter.
So you stop and breathe, and that would be
Mm,
akin to grounding. Before
yes.
I missed that. We also do grounding before we start rituals. So you stop and ground,
Hmm.
and in making that is read the pattern.
Yes.
And that means
Read.
looking at the gauge of yarn and the gauge of needles and
Hmm.
read through the pattern once and get an idea on like what's coming.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't assume that they're going to do something one way instead of another because maybe they're doing that for a specific reason, probably.
Yeah. Read a few lines ahead so you
Yeah,
know. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And just refamiliarize yourself because maybe it's only been a day since I worked on it, and maybe it's been several years. So
Right.
it just depends. Sort of wake up the project again.
And maybe how many hanks of yarn you might need cuz I mean, I don't know about you, but Richard ran out of yarn and the dye lot was different and he's real mad about it.
Oh, I mean, that happens. It's an opportunity for creative improvement. And who knows why that may have happened? It could have been a pattern error. It could have been a gauge situation. Maybe the yarn was skimpy. Who knows?
There's some beautiful handmade yarns out there, and not all dye lots are going to be the same because it's a beautiful handmade yarn.
That's right.
That's how we're
Always buy
looking
an
at
extra
this.
hank whenever possible. Yes, yes. Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, so that's pretty exciting. So now that we've talked a little bit about making our ritual and what that entails, let's take a quick break and then we'll go into knitting circles and witches' covens.
Yay.
We'll be right back.
I just love my dog Pancakes. In fact, she's the reason I designed the little blankie pattern. It's a cute little throw blanket with a hint of magic that's perfect for any baby, furry or not. Truth be told, I've been known to cuddle up with Little Blankie myself on a few chilly nights. Don't tell Pancakes. Learn more about Little Blankie and all of my knitting patterns at lightfromlantern.com.
Katie,
Jim.
I've been hearing a lot lately from people how I'm so much more than a palm reader. So I'm cooking something up and I'm going to launch something kind of amazing.
Wait a minute. Are you keeping secrets from me?
Yes. And if you want to know more about it, the first place I'm going to start talking about
it's probably your Instagram, right?
No, actually, that's the last place. It's going to be my email list.
Oh, of course.
I always try to give a little gift with my emails. I hate spam. I hate it when people are just asking me to buy stuff all the time. No, I want to give people little presents in their email box, a little modern mudra they can use, a little free download they can download, a meditation. I want people to subscribe to my email list so that they get this announcement later this year with my thing that I'm making.
Oh my gosh. Well, you heard it here first. Don't miss out on this awesome upcoming announcement, which you can find on Jim's email list. Hey, Jim, how can people go ahead and sign up for that email list?
Go to thedivinehand.com and hit subscribe at the top in the navigation bar.
It's just that easy. All right, everybody, no excuses. Get on it.
Welcome back.
Yay.
So, in the second half, we're going to talk about knitting circles and witches' covens. I know. At first, I was like, these are the same thing, right?
Yeah, like they kind of, I don't know, are they the same thing?
I think in some ways, we kind of had a chat that where we'll find out the ways that they maybe kind of veer away from each other at a certain point, but ultimately...
Okay, first... What's a group of knitters called? You know how we have a parliament of owls and we have when we have a murder of crows and we have I don't know what a group of alligators is called, but we have these names for groups of type of, whatever. So what's a group of knitters?
I'm pretty sure it would be a gossip of knitters. Very likely. It's the thing you do while sitting around in a circle knitting, I think.
Yeah, that's humorous and cute. Yeah, that's very sweet.
What about a group of witches?
I think we figured out that it's an argument of witches.
Ah, that's right. Yes.
I don't know if that's exact. That's not very flattering. But
I mean, it could be said with knitters too, if I'm being honest.
I think,
an opinion of knitters, an opinion of witches.
I think that could be true. An opinion of witches. Yeah.
I like that.
Maybe you can think of a better one. If you think of a better group, demonym, is that what it's called? Of a group of knitters or a group of witches, please put it, tag us, send us a message. We would love to know what your humorous name, your cute name, maybe more complimentary than what we can think of for both knitters and or witches would be. That would be so fun.
Yeah. We'd like to hear your feedback.
All right. So why do we think these are similar? What are some of the things that make these similar?
So initially I thought, well, okay, so it's a social group is what I assumed. But there is a lot of work being done too. And I suppose it ultimately depends on the type of group it is. But in my experience anyway, a knitting group has always been more social. People are usually actively knitting, but it's usually something for themselves, not necessarily something that's like a group project where they're
Right.
all doing the same thing. That does come occasionally. Like there are some great movements like for anti-bullying and whatnot, where people are coming together to make hats all at the same time for the same project. And that's very powerful. But I think ultimately the bigger group of them it's a more social aspect. So
Right. It's not called a stitch and bitch for nothing, right?
exactly. They're not a gossip for knitters because they're not talking. So
Except for that one knitter
that's
over
right.
there.
Yeah, they keep quiet and they like to just, lurk, and that's fine too.
Right.
So, yeah, and I'm kind of curious now how your definition of a coven is sort of different than that. Not necessarily
Well,
all the same.
There's a cute bumper sticker that this reminds me of. You can find sometime that says "Witches do it in circles." With the double entendres there because it's really funny, right?
Yes.
And I just think about how if you're going to knit, I've never seen a group of people knitting where they're lined up in a classroom, right? Where you're knitting, you're not knitting looking at someone's back. Unless it's so crowded that there's concentric circles of people, right? Or you're in two different sort of circles. It's always little multiple circles of people sort of knitting in little groups, right? I used to work at a cancer center, and there was always the Knit for Life group where people were knitting hats or shawls or different things for cancer patients, right? And that was always really a cool thing that people were doing, right? And they were always sitting in a circle. We would always have to rearrange the furniture in the room that they were sitting in because they would move it from the standard, sort of classroom setup. And they would always mess it up and move it into a big circle. And I was always like, what the heck's going on in here? It was always the Knit for Life group that was moving our setup into circles, right? And so it reminds me of witches. And I always thought they're doing some kind of pagan ritual in here. No, they were knitting.
Kind of, yeah.
Really cute,
ritualistic
right?
knitting.
Yeah. So I think about how witches do it in circles in that bumper sticker. And this is the same thing, right? So we meet in a circle. Circles are super powerful, right? This is how naturally human beings want to meet in this circular shape because we all stand equal on the circle. We see each other, right? If I'm on the perimeter of a circle and I speak, everyone can hear me. If I'm in the middle of the circle, only half the people or a quarter of the people that I'm speaking to can hear me, right? But if I'm on the circle, everyone can hear and see me, right?
Yes. That's why it was the Knights of the Round Table and not the Knights of the Square couple of tables that are over there in the corner.
Exactly. So when you have a setup where there's a classroom, there's a person, well, let's just be honest, the guy at the front of the room, there's a hierarchy there. There's an implied hierarchy. When we have a circle, it's a really wonderful, everyone can contribute, right? So there's this really marvelous the implication there, and the reality there is really beautiful. So we all contribute. And I just think about how when we do witchcraft, we are all participatory. No one can just watch. When we do magic, no one sits on the sidelines. You can't come to, well, we don't have public ritual, but on the occasions when we are doing public ritual, you can't be a looky-loo. You are either you have to dance, you have to participate, right? If you're going to be there, otherwise you're not invited. You can't be there. Yeah. So I think you can't really be at a stitch and bitch or a knitting circle and not really knit, right? If someone's going to cajole you, someone's going to hand you a couple knitting needles, and
that's right. Even if you don't want to knit, even if that was not your intention, if you find yourself sitting at a knitting circle for long enough, you'll end up knitting.
Or helping, or you'll be untangling that hank of yarn.
Or putting price tags on yarn. You will be involved.
They'll put you to work.
Yes, that's a great point. Oh my gosh. So tell me why a circle is so powerful. I mean, you said it's very, it's balanced, and you do see that in so much symbology. Even I was just thinking like the yin yang symbol. It's two halves making a circle, right? Um,
And circles within circles, right?
yes, and
Well, think
spirals.
about nature. A
Mm,
tree grows in a circle. The trunk is a circle. Its
right.
general sort of like canopy is an arc and a circle. Its
Mm,
root structure spreads out in a circle, right? Soap bubbles are a circle. The sun is a circle. The planet is a circle. Our orbit is circular, right?
oh,
Elliptical. Like
blood platelets.
everything,
Yes.
your cells are circles. Your whole
Oh,
body is a series of ellipses. If you've ever taken my art classes, all the art classes I've ever taken, what you realize is human beings, there are no actual straight lines in nature.
yes.
Everything is a series of ellipses, just infinitely smaller, right? Our
Mm,
whole body is just a series of ellipses at different sizes. And you can draw the body most accurately by
mm.
drawing a series of large and small circles, right?
Oh, yes. Seven
And it's
heads.
just absolutely beautiful to
Oh,
just like draw these little circles all over and just accurately describe in drawing, the body and everything in nature, right?
mm,
So we just see the circles are just so prevalent and are just part of what we see. And so we look to nature. I mean, witchcraft is really about looking to nature as the wisdom, as the source of ultimate wisdom of who we are. And
mm.
so the circle becomes this amazing symbol of everything,
Wow.
of infinite, of the connection of all of
Mm,
us, right? And so it just is. We of course it makes sense that the easiest and most natural way for us to gather without thinking about it, if we just link arms, if we
mm.
all hold hands and step out until our hands are linked together and stretch out like 20 people, and we just step back until our hands are sort of taut, we will just form a circle. That's the
That's
shape,
crazy. Yeah.
right? In some other reality, in some other dimension, we might naturally form a square because that's just how physics works in that alternate universe. But in our universe,
Hmm.
it's a circle, right? And
Gosh.
so that's just how it works, and it's just beautiful, right?
It is blowing my mind, actually.
It
Even like
is.
your energy field is a circle. I mean, like
Yeah.
everything is a circle. Our
Oh
eyeballs
my
are
God.
circles.
Everything is a circle. Ah! And now she
Oh,
spirals in a circle down into the circle of the underworld of a circle.
that's
And
right.
we'll see her in a
That's
few
right.
circles.
I'll swoop back up like a Taurus. Woo! And come right
The
back
Taurus
out.
symbol. The
Ah!
Taurus symbol is a circle. What?
Yeah, we're a Taurus making factory. Wow,
Well, and think
interesting.
about the cycles. A cycles is conceptualized as a circle,
Yeah.
and it spirals, right?
Mm,
We look at like the cycles of the year as circles, as spirals, right?
yeah.
So pretty
Well,
amazing.
even if you think about it, and maybe you haven't thought about it yet because you haven't made one, and that's not your fault. A cowl in knitting, when done in the round, is not actually a circle. It's a spiral, much like the barber's pole. So each circle isn't stacking right on top of each other. The last one is going just slightly up to do the next level.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's very interesting that
Well,
again.
let me tell you that you are not knitting anything but spirals because I mean everything you knit is a spiral because as you go back and forth, even on a regular like
Yeah.
stitch, you're going back and forth and it's kind of a spiral. Even if you wear that scarf, you think you knit a scarf, but it's wrapping around your neck. It's wrapping around in a circle. Like everything is
Oh
okay,
my
we'll stop now.
gosh. Oh my gosh. I can't.
So
Huh.
that's why circles are powerful.
Yeah. Wow.
So they
Okay.
symbolize unity, connection, infinite, our origin. They are very much a part of us and a part of our DNA.
Hmm.
And because everything is a circle, like it gets back to the hermetic principle of like, and like the magical principles and just how everything is like all is
Yeah.
one,
All
like everything
connected.
is together. Yeah.
Well, that's
And
a great
it
example.
really speaks to the divine connection of all of us.
Absolutely. Yes. So now that we've talked about the basics of what, a knitting circle is and what a coven is, tell me a little bit more about the differences. I mean, I think the biggest difference I've seen is the social aspect. Like we were talking about, what do you want from your coven that would be different from what a knitting circle is going to offer?
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of similarity, between these two things. You were talking about um, the social aspect, and I think that there is a lot to be said about the social aspect of both of these things. But both a knitting circle doesn't exist without the knitting, right? Like a book club doesn't exist without the books. Otherwise, it's just we're getting together for wine and cheese and talking, right? Which sometimes happens. But without the thing we're meeting about, then it's just like a social event. So without the knitting, then it's just people getting together, hanging out, right? So the knitting is the pillar around which we circle. And it's not a pillar in the way, it's a pillar, it's what facilitates us getting together. So it isn't just a social club. The social aspect is, excuse me, the social aspect is secondary to the knitting and actually is a function of the knitting. Without the knitting, if I went into a knitting circle and confiscated everyone's knitting, the social aspect of the knitting group would quickly fall away, and I would have a bunch of angry people chasing me.
That you would. Good point.
That I would. real mad. People would be real mad.
Yeah.
Do you know they don't make those? I would have people chasing me. They don't make those nickel plated needles anymore. Give those back.
You're taking all my stitches fell off. Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be
not too much panic.
There'd be a lot of anger. I would be beaten to a pulp with knitting bags and poked in the eye with needles. Yes.
The nicest ladies turn into the meanest ladies.
The meanest ladies all of a sudden. So that's a really important thing. So when I think about the social aspects, we love that part of it, but it is really not it's not the thing. It's not a social club. It's a knitting club. Many a knitting circle. Well, I don't know about knitting circles. Many a coven have fallen apart because people have mistaken the coven for a social club.
Yes, I think I know.
Has that happened?
Yes.
Has that happened with knitting circles where they focus too much on the socialization and not enough on the knitting?
Absolutely, sure has. Yeah, seems to be prevalent everywhere there's people, as it turns out.
Or maybe Julie and Gina broke up and now the knitting circle fell apart because there's tension, too much tension in the yarn.
Half of the people are on Julie's side and half of the people are on Gina's side, but they're all still knitting. So what's the big? I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And suddenly whatever you're knitting, that project, the fabric gets real tight and it just doesn't work. See how I know knitting enough to make those jokes?
Hey, he knows.
So on our website, there's some interesting things about covens that I think are interesting to sort of read. And I'll read some of them, which is inspired by What is a Coven by Forrest Batura. It's an article, but a coven is an intentional community of committed individuals actively practicing together. It is not a club that just requires membership without attendance or practice.
I love it.
How does that relate with knitting? Do you think that's similar?
100%.
You can't just show up and not knit.
Yeah. Why are you there? You would be looked at as strange.
I'd be like weird. I'd be the weirdo lurker who's like, are you looking at me or are you coveting my yarn? Or like, get your paws out of my alpaca.
Mm-hmm. And usually the people who are there that aren't participating don't want to be there, so it's not really like a positive energy situation there.
Right.
They're like, I'm ready to go home. I just came here to drop off this person. I have to stay because they can't drive. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're over in the corner. They're reading a magazine or they're doom scrolling on Facebook or playing World of Warcraft on their phone, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, a coven is a close-knit group of people sharing intimate space and profound experiences with each other. It is not a substitute for family.
Oh.
A little harsh, right?
Oh, that's the number 1.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's the right group of knitting, if it's the right knitting circle. Do you get deep? Do people, does it become
I would say like
intimate?
going to your knitting circle is like going to your hairdresser, is like, going to your bartender. You spill the tea about all of the things that are happening usually. Like, unlike that statement, these are usually like your friends and your family and for a variety of reasons.
Not a substitute for, but they're like it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, how about this one?
Yes.
This might be a place where it's different.
Okay.
A coven is a congregation of clergy who choose to utilize the shared language of a spiritual tradition. It is not a church of people following a single priest or supporting an institution, meaning we're all priests and priestesses on a circle. We're not following the grand poobah.
Yeah. I think that could apply to knitting to a degree.
Well, there isn't like, I guess, a grand poobah of like, welcome to the Katie Rempe and Light from Lantern Knitting Circle. You are going to knit the Traveler's Talisman, and I'm going to be the only person that can show you how.
That's right.
I mean,
maybe. I'm
maybe
the only one that can tell you how to knit, and there's no other way to do it.
But that's a knitting class. That's not a knitting circle, right?
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't say there's like a cult leader of knitters or anything. That's like
wait. I thought that was
one.
I thought that was Stephen West. Aren't we all like?
There he does have a large fan group. I will.
He's
say
amazing.
That.
I love him.
Well deserved. Yeah.
Well deserved. Yeah. Okay. I have 2 more. It's just fun.
Right. Yes, I love it.
It is an experiential, mysterious, and non-linear. Many lessons are discovered rather than taught. So it's not a conventional school. Teachings aren't always obvious.
Ooh.
So we discover through experience. We discover as we go.
Yeah. Well, what better way to learn than to knit something, not do it right, unknit it, and do it again, right? Yeah. So kind of, yeah.
The rip out. We learn more from the rip out.
From the mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah. Last one. A coven is a place to discover your own power within, your own path, and your own strength. It is not a support group, a 12-step program, or therapy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Ditto for knitting. Not a therapy replacement. They're your friends, but they're not your shrink. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yarn does shrink if you wash it in hot water. So please make sure you block your finished products properly.
Yes, that's right. Always read the label. Are you sure you don't knit? Have I
have no idea.
This whole time?
I live with knitters and crocheters. I'm married to a crocheter, so this is why I know things.
Oh, right. Well, that's good. That's good.
Also, I'm gay. I do wash things. I do laundry. I've destroyed garments.
Oh, you're tidy. That's nice.
Yeah, I'm tidy.
Oh. So it's all about setting expectations from what I'm hearing here, because probably someone after looking at your website there isn't going to just show up and be like, oh, I'm here for the social hour. Probably not.
Yeah, especially since we don't put our address out there, but yeah.
Well, that helps too. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's funny, because I have enjoyed knitting circles, and I have seen the nice things that they can do, and I've seen the more dramatic things that can happen. And I have to say that after a long period of time being involved in one, I had zero desire to be involved in any sort of knitting circle for a long time, and I've only just now kind of come around to that. Do you think that's kind of a typical experience?
Yeah. Do you have a little black eye from being in one or something? Do you
Oh,
have a little bit of a
emotional.
bruise from, yeah, emotional bruising from that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's this difference between a social group and a working group. And, I think sometimes things become like they're social, or the social gets out of control. The group dynamics, the emotions can get out of control. The like whole like drama of whatever, and it loses its focus. Is that this is about the knitting,
Yeah.
and then people can become solitary. But then you can get a little lonely, and if you don't heal from the social experience or don't have a way to do that, and just to reference ritual again, we have a ritual around how, because dynamics are going to happen. I'm going to step on your toes. I'm going to screw up, right? And we need a ritual in order to heal the social dynamics when I accidentally poke you with my knitting needle, or when I accidentally stick my wand in your face. And it's inevitably an accident, right? We have a ritual to heal that. We have a ritual that is not just spiritual bypassing, but it's real, like admitting when I was wrong, talking about it, having real healing, and then coming back together. And so if we don't have that way to heal socially, then we're going to leave people hurt, and sort of that creates some solitary practitioners, I believe, in both making and in witchcraft that don't need to be there. And so our group and what we're committed to is being able to have healed, conscious, evolved, embodied group practice that has us be powerful in the world. Because when we do magic together, we're stronger. And I think when we make together, we learn from each other, and we're able to up our game and do amazing work, right?
Absolutely. You see
the gestalt of it
working on something more difficult than maybe you would, and you see, oh, it's not that hard. Or maybe they're working on some, your guys are all working on a spell together, and you see, oh, maybe I wouldn't have been comfortable doing this on my own, but in the group setting, yeah, it's very powerful. It can be just as beneficial as non-beneficial if you let it.
Think about what we did when on the episode Katie Learns Magic.
Yeah.
When we did that candle magic spell, we did it together. And would you have ever done that on your own? Well, maybe. But how fun was it to do it with a friend?
Oh, yeah.
Who you trust?
I wouldn't have learned half the amount of things on my own. Just having your cousin there as well, too, as another person to have feedback from. I've always loved working in groups. So for me, I can always find the value in that. Yeah, it really is a much deeper experience.
Yeah, same with knitting. When I learned knitting with you and you were showing me, and it was on Zoom because it was still in the pandemic. And I was like, oh, I do this way and I do that way. And then I had Michael here to show me his way of doing it, and the encouragement and everything. It was awesome.
Yeah, so it's just
so
about
fun.
Finding what works for you and a group that, correlates with what you're trying to get out of it. So, if you're going to a social group to do work, it's probably not going to work out well for anybody. So.
And if you're going to a group and you just end up socializing, also pretty lame.
Yeah. Read the room.
Social's great. But if that's what it's for. So, Well, this has been super fun talking about ritual, talking about groups and group dynamics. It's awesome.
Speaking of groups, aren't you going to a conference that's virtual at some point soon?
I am. I'm actually presenting at a conference Friday. I don't know the day that I'm presenting quite yet. It will be known by the time this episode is airing. However, there is Astro Magia conference, AstroMagia.org. It is an online conference Friday, September 17th through Sunday, September 19th of 2021. I am teaching the planetary power in your palms, the modern mudras you can create using hand gestures, and you can register at astromagia.org. It will be an amazing conference with tremendous, phenomenal presenters, including my cousin, who we just mentioned, and other fantastic presenters, my astrology teacher, Dr. Jen Zart, my cousin, Reverend Charlie McCurry, and others. So I highly recommend checking that out, astromagia.org.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put all of the links in the show notes for everyone's easy reference.
I have really a big fan of cozies. Like I hate it when drinks get my hands cold. In this household, we always have cozies around beer cans. It's like Richard has it from his childhood, and you have these amazing cozies that we're still using all summer.
Yes.
So if you want to knit some cozies so you can tell your drinks apart and use them around your beer cans for the last stretch of summer, I believe in summer. I'm a summer boy. You can find them and other amazing patterns, including the Traveler's Talisman and others, or get signed up to know when those are released at Light from Lantern and the brilliance of Katie Rempe. lightfromlantern.com or on Instagram at lightfromlantern, because Katie is amazing.
Oh, well, gee, thank you so much, Jim. And ditto. Obviously, I wouldn't be making a podcast with just anybody. If you want to find out more about Jim and what he has going on, make sure to stop over to his website, thedivinehand.com, where you can sign up for his newsletter, find out about all the cool happenings on his end, and you can also follow him on Instagram at divinehandjim. Hurrah! Yay!
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's another wrap of a great episode. Until next week, Jim.
Until next week, I hope people let us know. Yes. What is a knitting circle called? What is a witch's coven called? What's that group name? Tag us on social. Send us a message. Let us know. We want to know. And until next week.
That's right. We'll be waiting for your review. We'll see you next week.
I'll hold my breath. Okay. See you next week.
Right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This episode is a wrap. If you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast streaming app. And don't forget, you can see full video episodes of Knit a Spell on Light from Lantern's YouTube channel.